Hello beautiful people, welcome to this video. Today we're going to be talking about oversharing. I'm Alessia, by the way. I am somebody who has overshared in the past. I'm way more aware of why I used to overshare, of why I might be tempted to overshare, and where my boundaries are. And I'm certainly better at sussing out the people that maybe are not on my wavelength now. I think I've got a bit more knowledge on what I'm looking for in friends. Some of you girlies might not actually need to hear this. Some of you may actually need to be encouraged to come out of your shell a bit more, to offer up yourself a bit more, your authentic self, when you meet people. If you're someone that struggles to come out of their shell, struggles to be honest with people, this isn't the video for you. So, we overshare for a multitude of reasons, and it does depend on who you are and what you've gone through as to why you're oversharing. People can overshare if they experience a lack of care, a lack of emotional support growing up as a kid. So if your parents weren't particularly there for you when you were crying, when you were down, when you were going through things, if they didn't ask you, are you okay, what's happening, how can I help, if they didn't cuddle you, there's a chance that you're oversharing because you want to replace what you missed growing up. So it makes sense that you're opening up to people, you're saying, this is what I'm struggling with, maybe you'll help me with it, maybe you'll care, and I can prove to that inner child that they are cared for and they are safe. It's you trying to protect yourself, it's you trying to heal that inner child. I often think a lot of the time as adults we are crying out for help to look after our inner child, our child self. So I think it is important that whenever we start to feel insecure and act in ways that doesn't align with what we feel we should really be doing, we should be like, have I had an experience in my childhood that has made me feel less than? And is that why I'm acting in this certain way that I know isn't actually going to benefit me, and I know that isn't the right thing to do for me? If you are an oversharer, I think it's really important to reflect on why. Another reason that people overshare is because they've experienced trauma, and trauma can often lead to black and white thinking in extremes. So it can look like they're good, they're bad. I hate that, I love this. It's, extreme thinking. So if you're meeting someone new and you are navigating from this black and white thinking and they say some things that you agree with, you might trust them straight away, and then that might urge you to overshare. With black and white thinking, you assign people, places and things to either be good or bad. You think in absolutes, basically. I was reading a really interesting article on Forbes about how to identify whether you're oversharing or you're opening up to someone in the right way that is good for you and good for the person. And it was basically talking about identifying your intention. What is your intention with sharing this information? Is it because you really trust the person and it really feels right to do this? Or is it because you want a quick connection? Or is it because you really want sympathy? You want them to feel sorry for you? Or is it because you're really struggling to process things and you just want to talk about it so you can kind of come to terms with things and heal things? It can be difficult, because I'm now reflecting on this one experience I had where I told someone a very, very, very important bit of information to do with my life that I hold on to so tightly. I shared it with this woman who I thought I could trust, but actually I'd just met her. But she was saying all the right things, she had open posture, she was looking me in the eye, she was maintaining eye contact, she was softly spoken. I felt very safe, and she was revealing parts of herself, and it felt like this very energetically, it felt right. But the next day, because we were staying in a place together, the next day I woke up and she was quite cold with me, and I instantly regretted telling her this bit of information about myself. It made me regret things, it made me feel guilty, it made me feel all sorts of negative things. And in that moment, it did kind of feel right. I admit though, she did do a tiny bit of prodding, which meant that I did blurt out more than I think I actually wanted to in that moment. That's something that I think if we can work on, we should, on listening to our gut and our body. Our body knows what is right for us. If you're chatting to someone and you start to approach the topic of insecurities, and there's an insecurity that you could quite easily drop into the conversation, but it doesn't feel right, it's making you feel tense thinking about it, it's making you feel a bit jittery thinking about mentioning it, trust your body, trust your gut. I think it's really, really good to have a little reflect about the times where you have opened up to people and regretted it. And why have you regretted it? And what bit of information did you regret sharing? It's really good to reflect on this so we can set boundaries. So we can be like, okay, I only talk about my passions, my interests, and current affairs with people when I first meet them. Until I establish trust, however long that takes, then I can share my insecurities, my dilemmas with people that I am close with. This is something that I consider oversharing. If I meet someone new, I will not be sharing anything to do with my relationships to my friends, my partner, or my family. That's information for my very, very close, trusted friends. Even some people who I class as friends, I don't share the intimate details of my relationships with them because it feels like a very vulnerable thing for me. I just don't like discussing it, and that's my boundary. But you might not be the same. It might not feel like you're giving away a part of yourself. It may not fill you with guilt or regret or doubt to talk about your relationships with new people. It's all about just figuring out what makes you feel good. If you interact with someone and you leave the interaction feeling depleted and regretful, then it's time to analyze why, maybe set some boundaries and adjust how you interact with new people. But if you leave an interaction feeling energized, feeling calm and collected, if your internal dialogue is pretty positive, then I don't think you need to worry that you've overshared. Yeah, it really is about just being really present with what's going on in your head after you've met someone and whilst you're with someone, and how your body is reacting. So I shared with you that experience that I had where I overshared and I regretted it. I just quickly want to say, I now don't regret oversharing with that person, luckily, because that bit of information hasn't been weaponized against me. The moment's just flown by and time has healed all. But also I learned a lot in that moment, maybe not in the moment, but after the moment and after the panic of revealing that information and realizing that I'm not that close with this person. I don't actually feel like I can trust this person. After that subsided, I was like, do you know what? This has just helped me understand myself and understand my boundaries and understand how vulnerable that bit of information is and how I need to be more protective when it comes to sharing that. It's a learning curve, and I know it's really hard to come to that realization. It's a lot easier in hindsight, but you know, I just want to encourage you to think of the good things to come of these quite painful situations. There is always a little bit of wisdom to come from pain. Another little tip that I have is, okay, so say you're meeting someone new, maybe you met them on Instagram and they messaged you. Have a little look at their Instagram, see what they're interested in. Have a little journal, have a little think. I'm not encouraging you to force conversations, but I think it's good to have a little brainstorm about the things that you have in common maybe, and the things that you feel comfortable sharing. If you're meeting someone who is a friend of a friend and this friend has said, look, they're really into mental health, and I think you guys would really connect on that, you can maybe say, do you know what, I don't really want to talk about my mental health struggles with them, but I'll talk about it generally, and I'll share the mental health podcasts that I listen to and my favourite mental health YouTubers, and we can talk about it in a non-personal way. If I meet someone in the early stages, I'm going to probably talk about veganism, feminism, mental health, animals. I just love chatting about nature and animals and going for nature walks and having coffee. That is just, I love that, it's my element. And that tends to be enough to build a connection with someone. And then gradually I might reveal bits of my life that I'm struggling with, my insecurities, my childhood stuff. But it's very rare that in the first few meetups that I will share anything really vulnerable. And the only time I think I'd ever really do that is if I just feel very trusting in the person. But it's hard, isn't it? Because if you're only seeing someone for a couple of hours, you can't get a full grasp for who they are. I was actually chatting to someone on Instagram the other day about not forcing connections with people. And they said, well, actually, if you don't have a lot of trust in humans, which is kind of understandable considering we live in a world that's going through so much disaster, to caveat everything I've said, it is important to be your authentic self with people and to be like, this is me, unapologetically and flawed. Yeah, just know your limits, know your boundaries, have a little journal about it. I think journaling about friendship and reflecting on how we interact with people and how we feel after we meet new people and setting boundaries is just the best thing we can do to protect ourselves and mother ourselves. Yeah, I hope you found this video interesting. I am going to be posting a video on decentering men in a couple of days, so subscribe, hit the little bell notification button to know when I'm posting that video. I know it's something that a lot of us women really want to talk about because we live in a patriarchal world that makes us feel less than and makes us really value men. So it makes for a very difficult self-love journey with many hurdles.